Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online, and this is EVE Vegas week. I think lots of people are gonna be pretty damn happy. I only took a look at the Reddit thread. Being from Europe, the Vegas time zone is not the best for me, so I didn't watch any of the first day stream, but some of the news is pretty damn good, especially the changes to the structures, where you'll have a 24-hour shield timer, then an armor timer and a structure timer. But the armor timer, if you're basically in an up against an abandoned structure, so if it doesn't have any services fueled, then that will also be cut. So this is actually fully in line with my expectations, guys. I think I've said it a couple of times. I do think that CCP first wanted everybody out of the bosses, and with the winter expansion it's basically gonna be a massive final push to get everyone out of the moon mining bosses, and those will have to be replaced. If you want to do moon mining, you'll have to get rid of that boss and put down one of the new refineries. All that's left to do then is to get rid of the outposts by turning those into faction citadels, and you are good to go. Everyone or such a large part of the game will be in the new structures that you can then go ahead and nerf them when it comes to their super defensive capabilities at the moment. So that's basically what's going to happen. I personally don't think it's bad news. Some more good news. Moon mining coming to wormhole space and HiSec, really awesome. Definitely changes my schedule again, because I think at the moment you can't put your moon in the right position, your refinery, sorry, in the right position across moons in wormhole space or in HiSec, and so as a result I need to recheck my plans for sure. And then also big change to alpha characters, accessibility of battleships and battle cruisers. That might change the nature of alpha characters by quite a bit, because that means that lots more of the game is going to be accessible even for people that play for a much longer time but don't want to sub every month, for instance. So yeah, EVE Vegas, quite a bit of interesting news. I definitely need to take a closer look at the stream once I can. Let's move on to the market, of course. That's why we are here, and on popular request, of course, the ticker is back. I'm actually planning to do it like this, I think. I think that could look pretty good. So down on the bottom you've got a ticker that reflects the weekly changes from some of the items that I check every single week, and then on top I'm going to keep the CCP ticker as well, so that you have a little bit of an idea. Maybe some of them will pop out at some point. They have this general little graph of their evolution, and that gives us both options. I think it's not a bad idea. It could be pretty cool. So let's get started. As always, we want to start with plex. That's going to be at 310. So there we go, and let's take a look at that. So first of all, let's get rid of the Jita only filter. Here are plex being sold. Just one jump out for a little bit over 3 million, 3,082,000 ISK. The buyers are 3,041,000 ISK, so a very narrow margin here again. Basically, sellers have been forced down by more supply, and the buyers are staying just above 3 million. As a result, we've got this little dip back towards 3 million on the chart. Basically, in the last month towards the expansion, we've been hesitating. That is quite interesting. Perhaps now with the expansion, somehow they can create more supply. Also keep in mind that the holidays are coming, so plex sales might be plentiful as well. We might see a buy opportunity and some more pressure on plex prices at the moment. Yeah, definitely hesitating to go up in a substantial way, which comes as a bit of a surprise to me. I thought that maybe in the last weeks towards the expansion we might see a bit of a rush, as long as CCP didn't come out with too many sales there. So not happening, stuck just above 3 million, which is still 1.5 billion for 1 month sub, which is quite a hefty price, of course. Let's move on to the pilot training certificate. That one goes up towards close to 1.5 billion and is probably going to stay there. I can't see it keep going, especially not with what's happening for plexes, but these are being sold now for 1,490,000,000 ISK, very expensive. and the buyers are at 1,420,000,000 ISK. So this is a little bit less than Plex, but considering that normally you buy these for a little bit cheaper as well, I would say that these trading certificates are very expensive at the moment. Next up, let's take a look at the skill extractors. That is of course going to very closely follow the Plex market. So here we can see that we are stuck right around 350 million ISK, a little bit below that most of the time. And at the end you actually see a little bit of a jump up, but the median daily prices are coming back in line with the month of September. These are selling at the moment for 347 million ISK, which is just below the 350 mark once again. So you can see that this has already normalized. And the buyers are coming in at 337 million ISK. Again, a decently small margin between these two. We're basically in an established market that doesn't really know which way it wants to go. Sometimes the sellers manage to hold off a little bit and then prices go up slightly, but the buyers don't want to budge, and then sometimes they're pushed back down on the seller side, and as a result margins close again, price stays pretty flat. Quite interesting. Let's take a look at the skill injectors though. What are those doing? Also decently flat at just below 800 million ISK, so that's quite interesting. 804 million ISK for the sellers, 790 million ISK for the buyers. Again, decently narrow margin, a little bit more, but it's also an 800 million ISK item here. So this one for me, if you want to take the gamble for an investment, I would say a couple of large skill injectors might just be the ticket, especially again considering now with the alpha changes. I mean, I read that they are going to force basically new alpha characters that reach their 5 million free skill points, their alpha pool, to sub in order to get more skill points towards battle cruisers and battleships. Oh, also no more race restriction. That might actually be a pretty big driver for alpha characters to get into the skill injector. So even if they can't skill into battleships with the skill injectors, if they can use them, for instance, to go for their Amar characters into some Galente ships and into some Caldari ships, that might really drive up demand. So this would personally be my gamble, because I can see Plex prices increase with inflation, but of course the demand for skill points increase as well on the alpha character side, if CCP can get the right marketing going on that, of course. And then we've got the small skill injectors that follow a decently similar path, just below 170 million ISK, 162 million for the sellers, 150 million for the buyers. Actually, probably percentage-wise, a decently large margin here, almost close to 10% on the small skill injectors. It's of course also a newer market that will still need a little bit of time to completely mature, so that we get a chart in line with some of the other stuff here in the Plex related market. So pretty interesting. I do think that it's still a bit of a toss-up this year. A very successful expansion with lots of returning players could increase demand for Plex quite substantially all of a sudden towards the later winter, and then probably Q1 as well, with all the structure changes. On the other hand, of course, with the holidays, sales might disrupt any of that quite heavily as well. Let's move on to some minerals at 8:30. And let's take a look at what's happening here. First of all, of course, Tritanium continuing its sharp descent. I was sort of thinking if I wanted to make a video about the September economic figures, which is like a monthly dev blog that comes out. I decided against it because there was really not much interesting or all too interesting happening there. But Tritanium being sold now for 5.33 ISK, and the buyers are at 524, and you still see 1.3 billion, a billion here, a billion here. It was really the eye-popping information in the report is that the Imperium is back in their space, and they are back mining up a storm. So their numbers on minerals mined and ores mined, the volumes are just crazy, and this is actually the impact of that. The largest group in the game is back on the PvE grind, and they've got way more minerals than they need at the moment, and thus they're crashing the mineral market once again. Is this an opportunity to buy at some point? Probably, but you need to see an Imperium related war in the future in order to be able to profit from that. So that's gonna be really the gamble when it comes to minerals, but it is pretty bad news for high-sec miners at the moment because they're competing with that biggest group that's got the better yields. They have those Rorqual fleets that just suck all of the asteroid belts dry in no time. And as a result, our efficiency is definitely going down. Luckily for miners, perhaps the resource wars could give us something else to do as well. We'll have to see how those rewards pan out, of course. Here is pyrite continuing under pressure as well, pretty close to a 1-year low now, getting really close to 5 ISK. So 531, again dipping below titanium, and 522 for the buyers of pyrite. And $1 billion coming in on pyrite is actually quite a lot. So the continued pressure is obviously here. Next up we've got Mixon also coming in under pressure. That's a little bit strange, but holding at 70 ISK. It is definitely still your main focus. 71.71 for the sellers of Mixon and 69.27 for the buyers. The buyers being forced below 70 ISK basically by fresh supply, right? They are pushed down by more and more supply. That is not good news. This could psychologically break Mixon and push it down. Luckily, if the Imperium is also planning to produce lots of stuff with all of their minerals, they'll need more Mixon, and so this is still your focus. If you are a high-sec miner, always prioritize the asteroids that will yield you Mixon, because even historically speaking, even before the Ascension changes happened, which basically gave the Imperium their massive capabilities when it comes to mining, Mixon is still really good even compared to that. Next up we've got Isogen. That's probably not gonna be great news either. No, bouncing back towards 50 ISK and flattening out there. 51 ISK for the sellers and 50.38 for the buyers. 100 million coming in here, another 100 million coming in here. It's a fire sale and prices are under pressure across the board on the high-sec minerals. Here is Noxium accelerating its descent and currently being sold for 360 ISK, again getting pretty damn cheap, and 343 for the buyers of Noxium. Pretty small margin, so it might try to stall, but the bad news comes here with the 43 million units, and then we've got another 3 million units. Although the buyers here 7 million, 2.3 million, they are there as well. I think they're basically gonna get overrun by the fresh supply here. We might head back towards the 300 range if this keeps up. Next up we've got some null-sec minerals. Let's take a look at Zytrine. Also under pressure, so that was the major indicator that it was really the Imperium coming back from their war and getting right back into the mining, into the massive mining, and that's what we're seeing right here. It's across the board, it's all the minerals, and that can basically almost only come out of null-sec, and the economic report for last month basically confirmed that. 1047 ISK for the sellers and 1000 ISK for the buyers for Zytrine, so we're heading back towards here at 1000 ISK. If we break below that, I wouldn't be afraid personally to buy up Zytrine, especially if you're planning to manufacture yourself. But the pressure is there, it's pretty obvious and uniform. Megasite next, also under pressure. 5-day moving average breaking 1250 like it's almost nothing. 1240 for the sellers and 1190 for the buyers. Decently small margin, some hesitation, but again the millions keep coming in quite nicely. Full front page in the last 48 hours being brought in here for Zytrine. It's in fact almost a full front page in the last 24 hours. Another 24 million here. Even the null-sec minerals are being brought in with pretty big numbers and are under pressure. And finally we've got Morphite, Tech 2 related. That one is also going down because you can mine it with the same mechanic basically. 10,250 for the sellers and 9,653 for the buyers. Buyers going back below 10,000 ISK here. We'll have to wait and see how quickly and how sharply we go down, but being dragged down by the rest of the minerals, who knows, Morphite might come into another buy opportunity as well. That was a pretty nice trade that I made, buying here at the lowest points, close to 8,000 ISK on the buy orders, and then selling, I think on this rally is where I sold a little bit early, but you can see the patterns here now again. Stuff like Isogen is going back to its really low point. Here is Noxium potentially as well, if that one goes back down towards 300. Then it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to keep an eye on Imperium activity. On a war and a decrease of their yields might be very good news. Another thing to maybe note is that, of course, with Isaac and wormhole space moon mining coming as well, we might see a bit more organized mining in those spaces as well, causing potentially even more supply. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how all of that plays out. Let's move on to PI next. That is at 1515. There we go. And let's get started. Here are the construction blocks coming back a little bit towards 12,000 ISK, but I would say from below average to above average. Big volume spike as well. So basically my call last week about construction blocks, I picked up a couple, but definitely not the amounts that I wanted. Maybe like 10% of what I wanted when I first put up the buy order. And other people must have noticed this as well, this massive sharp drop in construction blocks, and people just picked it up to the price that they were willing to pay. Currently being sold for 12,200, probably around average. Buyers 11,700, probably around average as well. So basically the investors have grabbed everything in this little hole here, in this little dip for construction blocks, even before I could jump on the opportunity. Consumer electronics next, a little bit of a slowdown, but at the tail end managing to maintain a price well above 13,000 ISK. 14,200 for the first seller, 15,000 almost for the first one with a decent volume, and 14,130 for the buyers. Above average, but for sure, consumer electronics in a pretty good place if you can produce those. Coolants next. Going down a little bit, we can see from the ticker that nitrogen fuel blocks are going down as well. So these are some of the PI goods that seem to be under pressure at the moment. Let's see what coolants is selling for. 12,150, first one coming in, 12,500 for the sellers in general, and then 11,510 for the buyers. I would say this is around average for coolants. Maybe the buyers are a little bit low. But on average 12,500. It's still okay if you want to sell your coolants, but then have the patience to put up a sell order. And if on the other hand you want to wait for a better opportunity, I can't blame you for that either, because you can see historically speaking that we can definitely have better prices for coolants as well. Enriched uranium next. Also going back down a little bit, 15,000 is still pretty decent though. 16,000 for the sellers, 14,500 for the buyers. Quite a big gap between those two, so the margin is quite large. When it comes to the volumes here, 25,000, 19,000 or 90,000 coming in here. Buyers though, 48,000, 16,000, 28,000, 100,000. So we've got strong demand and strong supply. The question is who is going to win out. I would say we need to drop towards between 12.5 and 15,000 to get back towards an average price for enriched uranium. So we are heading there. That is something to note as well. Increased volumes, lower prices means a little bit of dumping as well. Integrity response drones next. That is now settling at around 3 million. That is pretty typical because of the the new refineries. Of course, there was massive demand, so big price speculation, and then the market does tend to look for a round number where it can settle for a while, and that seems to be around 3 million for integrity response drones, because both the sellers and the buyers are right around that price. So we'll need some patience for our, if we want this cheaper, if we want to build up our own structures. And now with the information that in Q1 of 2018 CCP is planning to bring the moon mining mechanic to Isaac and to wormhole space, that might mean that I want to extend my my delay of my move again, because I'm not going to grab the rig from the Astros for the refining, put that into a refinery that would then be the wrong position when it comes to moon mining itself. So that is I probably want to deploy my refinery in the right place right off the bat. And so if that means delaying things, I'm actually, I think, willing to do that. Mechanical parts next, still dropping off in a bit of a seesaw motion, but heading towards 11,000 is here, 11,650 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Probably a touch below average by now, but not by all that much if you look at historical prices. Still, if you see buyers go to 10,000 ISK, that's when you might want to pounce. Nuclear reactors next, staying quite strong. These nuclear reactors selling for 132 to 33,000 ISK bars, 127,000. Definitely above average, pretty good one to produce at the moment. We've got oxygen next, going back to its 1-year high, quite interesting, selling for 653, 654, and the bars are at 573. Really expensive oxygen, something that would be pretty easy to produce. So if you have the means for that, definitely look into bring some of your oxygen to the market. It's a good sale at the moment. Robotics next. This is something we've been waiting for a very long time, at least I have, to see the robotics chart break 100,000 ISK on the downside again, and that brings it back on average, basically 101,000 for the sellers and 98,000 for the buyers, and that is about average. Maybe sellers going back just below 100,000 historically speaking has been the average, and it's a little bit closer to 90,000, but it's definitely trying to do that here on more supply. So here again, the robotics, it's fuel related, but look at where we are on the chart. Look at the momentum of this, just like with coolants here. If this goes lower, then this becomes really interesting as a potential purchase opportunity. I think it's already looking like it's heading there. Rocket fuel next, also going down sharply. If it's between 10 and 11k for sure. Sellers are at 11,000, buyers are at 11,000 as well. So no gap. This, oh well, sellers are actually at 12,000 ISK. So basically rocket fuel back on average, buyers a little bit below average, and more supply is going to start to threaten these prices towards interesting territories, I think. Self-harmonizing power cores, very similar to, of course, the integrity response drones, the massive structure, hype, increase in price, then a settling down at around 2.7 million apparently for this one. Yep, 2.7 million, a bit below and above that for the sellers, 2.6 million for the buyers. So self-harmonizing power cores might actually normalize back towards around 2 million or a bit above that in a more easy fashion than integrity response drones that does seem to have chosen 3 million as a bit of a barrier where it wants to stay for a while. Next up, we've got superconductors staying at around the 15k mark, but a little bit under pressure at the tail end. Still 14,700 for the sellers, 14,000 for the buyers, still well above average for the superconductors. Definitely a good one to sell as well. On storm planets you can make these in massive quantities. Test cultures next, still going was going higher towards 12.5 thousand, is hesitating at the tail end once again. So 11,600 for the sellers, 10,900 for the buyers. Still obviously above average. I would actually say that below 10,000 ISK is its average, considering what it's been for so long. But this was a nice little sell opportunity that is extending at the moment for test cultures. Finally, we have the wetware mainframes going down and settling at around 2.75 million. Yeah, 2.75 million for the first seller, 2.8 for a few more, 2.7 million for the buyers. Wetware mainframes, definitely a bottleneck in general when it comes to structure PI related stuff, and as a result, to my surprise, integrity response drones that is remaining the strongest and apparently wanting to stay at around 3 million ISK, but self-harmonizing power cores seem to have more momentum to go down faster than the wetware mainframes. Again, when it comes to these refineries for HiSec and for wormhole space, I think patience is going to be the name of the game, because if you're willing to wait until the moon mining mechanic, well, I may be wrong on that. Of course, if CCP makes it so that you could somehow scan them, or that it does become visible in HiSec at a point earlier, you do want your refinery ready to grab those spots as quickly as you can. It's a bit of a mixed bag here. We could go either way when it comes to preparations for the refineries and actual deployment and things like that. So we'll need all the details. It's gonna be pretty interesting. This could create a bit of a mini rush for more PI when CCP actually launches that mechanic in HiSec and wormhole space. It's something to keep in mind as well. If we see some of these PI related materials, structure PI related materials drop off sharply, then we might want to prepare for that possible secondary. It's never going to be as big as the current one, of course, but it might be there. So that was pretty damn good actually. Next up, we've got Tech 1 ships at 24.35. Yep, I'm right, yep. Let's take a look at those. Still haven't switched them around. At some point we may just do something a little bit different with the Tech 1 chips, but what is interesting here, the Abaddon going back up towards 200 million, basically running out of those on the seller side of things. The Alpha clone changes might become really important for the Tech 1 chip market. That is something to keep in mind, that I think we might see some impact there. Let's take a look at what the Caracal is doing. Staying above 10 million, but only just sellers 10.2 million, buyers 9.5 million. Obviously, I think the Caracal market is large enough that it's gonna show less impact when something happens, so that it's just alpha clone related. It's also cruiser, it's already accessible for alpha clones, so that might be a bit different as well, although with the ability to cross-train between races, I think a Caracal, for instance, is something that lots of nullsec alpha clones will definitely want to train into. So we'll see how all of it works out, of course. Here is the Cofter finally dropping off a little bit as well, towards 27.5 million, 28 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. Definitely pretty much on the low average end at the moment, recovering from that increased price. My theory is that when moon mining was tested on CC, they saw how far the individual asteroids were within a moon mining belt, and as a result, it doesn't make too much sense to do everything in stuff like Orcas and Rorquals. So some mining barges will definitely find their place in those fleets as well. And that's also going to be pretty interesting to see what they decide to do when it comes to moon mining in HiSec and in wormhole space, for instance, what kind of asteroid distribution they're planning there. They're definitely not going to do Tech 2 materials though, keep that in mind. The Ferox next, continuing its path below 55 million, so not much to say here. 54 million for the sellers, 49.7 million for the buyers. Decent availability when it comes to the Ferox, it is also a pretty popular ship. Hurricane next, slowly going down from below 50 million towards 45 million. Sellers are at 48 million, buyers are at 44.5 million. Again, availability a bit higher, prices go down. That is definitely something that happens here. Volume still pretty low. So nobody jumping on Tech 1 ships just yet when it comes to the announcement. Maybe battleships up a little bit again here. The Maelstrom selling for 190 million, buyers are at 175. Volumes, yeah, slight increase, but it's a couple of days ago, can't really be Vegas related. So the Maelstrom just selling a bit above average at the moment. Prophecy next, very flat chart here on the Prophecy, above 50 million despite its slow availability, but that is something that we see quite often. Of course, when a gap needs to be filled, 79.25, it gets filled pretty quickly. 53.4 for the sellers of Prophecies, 47 million for the buyers. I think with patience you can definitely easily pick up a Prophecy below 50 million. Sight next, also pretty popular ship, still staying at around 8 million, 8.4 for the sellers, 7.8 for the buyers, 123 here. It's gonna keep the price from exploding anytime soon, unless something like a war happens, of course, but it's gonna be pretty stable around 8 million, I think. The Typhoon next, also up a bit, but from a very low price point here. 163.5 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. Pretty cheap Typhoons at the moment. And finally, we've got the Vexor that is staying above 11 million in a more sustained way. 11.5 million for the sellers and 11 million for the buyers. The bad news is 40, 157, 92. The big numbers come in, and so these opportunities do get spotted. I'm a bit surprised that it stays here for so long, but we can expect to go back towards 10 million in a pretty short order. So the Tech 1 market, it's obviously also coming under pressure from the low mineral prices at the moment. It's going to be pretty tricky to make anything happen there, but if CCP does change the accessibility for these ships for alpha clones, then perhaps we could start to see some bigger changes when it comes to the Tech 1 market. At the moment, unfortunately, it's just really not all that interesting. Let's take a look at the Tech 2 market. That is at 29.20. Here it is going to be interesting, but we'll have to look at everything from the perspective of the moon mining change. Of course, what we know now is that we'll have moon mining in a couple of weeks. That is going to disrupt probably supplies at least a little bit. There's lots of people are holding off from just dumping everything Tech 2 related on the market, which is probably why you're seeing these very high Aries prices. But we also know that a couple of months later, these structures are going to become a lot more vulnerable than they are as what they'll be right now. So that is also probably going to push people towards expecting higher prices. Here is the Aries, for instance, definitely close to 1-year high, selling for 37 million almost, and the buyers are at 32.6 million. That is quite a decently expensive one. Big volume spike as well on the increase here. I think people were just willing to invest in these Aries ships even at price above 30 million, just to be ready and have them for the actual impact on the market when moon mining comes out. Here is the Claw, basically well above the normal average price, where dips to 20 million would be our buy opportunities. Currently selling for 29 million, buyers are at 27 million. Not at a high point like the Aries, but definitely still well within the range of the low points and the very high points. So yeah, I wouldn't invest in those myself, although you can now see that the Claw did fall back quite a little bit. You can pick them up below 30 million. If you think, like with the Aries, that prices might even pick up from 30 million, then the Claw could be a decent buy at the moment. It's your gamble to make. I personally am not going to take it all that much. I'm gambling a bit more on the rebalance team. I think that there's a bit more potential there. Next up here we got the Crow, again 1-year high, selling for 33 million ISK, buyers are 28.6 million ISK. Not so much on a volume spike, but I think basically producers and people that have Crows are not willing to sell them at the moment. They want to see what the impact of the moon mining change is going to be. Aries next, after dropping back a little bit, but nowhere near the previous lower ranges, dipping just below 50 million and bouncing off of that. So currently Aries being sold for 55 million, buyers are just above 50 million. That again is that same story. The sellers aren't willing to bring the price back down. Availability is decently limited as well. That's just, yeah, Tech 2 market. It's in prep mode for the moon mining changes. Next up here we've got the Flycatcher going to a 1-year high once again, selling for 84 million ISK. And the buyers are at 75 million ISK. And it's only at these higher prices that you see some more coming in. So some people, I think for the Aries, will see that as well. Yep, 25-20. Some people are saying, you know what, I'm going to sell some of them at these really high prices, but the general vibe is still hold off when it comes to the Tech 2 ships. Wait for the actual impact of the changes. Heretic next, 1-year high as well, 76.6 million. So if you have them, honestly, I would not gamble on the purchase side. I would try to sell at least partially at these prices. And look at that 40-12 here again on the Heretic at 76.6 million. Quite expensive and a pretty good price. Of course, 1-year high again. The Hound, that one is between the very high point and the low point, but definitely 28 million for the sellers, 25.6 million for the buyers. That's not where you want to be purchasing Hounds at. And here we see the exact opposite. We can see that they're just trickling in here, 1, 3, 4. Nobody's dumping 60, 70 Hounds at these prices. If we would see that shoot up towards 35 million, yeah, of course, you'll see people dump dozens of them at a time. But when it comes here, you can clearly see that the sellers are holding off their supplies. Malediction next, 1-year high, so we can definitely expect a bit more here. And there you go, 38, 39, 29, 20 people trying to sell their Maledictions at more than 30 million. Buyers here though, someone at 28 million willing to buy 40 of them. That's not what I'm willing to do, but to each his own, of course. Then next up we've got the Manticore. It's above 30 million, so we might see some supply. The war spike here was up to 35 million, so these are selling for 35 million and the buyers are at 26.5 million. Maybe it happened decently recently. I think we'll see a little bit of dumping in the upcoming days on the Manticore, just to try and take advantage of that 35 million sell price. Nemesis next, again between the high and the low point here, 28 million for the sellers, 25.5 million for the buyers. You've got some of them coming in here a little bit more, but availability, again, this is something that you should definitely notice, is you can't browse, you can't scroll here. That's what's available in JITA. That is very low. Again, a very strong indication that it's the sellers that are holding off. Purifiers next, coming off of a 1-year high, so that was a little bit of dumping, and so here we can see that 33.5 million, 27, 21, 23. After that we're starting to compete a little bit lower, still 64. Someone said, you know what, I'm gonna sell them, but it's decently slowing down here in the volumes, and we're between the high point and the low point. We're definitely nowhere near the old purchase opportunities. Saber next, also very close to a high point, 76 million for the sellers, 70 million for the buyers. Pretty damn expensive stuff. Volume increase, couldn't tell you where it's at because the price is actually flat. We'll see next week, I guess. So that's it for the Tech 2 markets. We'll have to wait until the expansion to actually see where all of this is going. Next up we've got Tech 3 ships. Let's take a look at those at 35. That's a nice number. Let's start here with the Confessor. So here, as I've said, Tech 3 ships are basically very popular in nullsec at the moment, but coming from these high prices, what I think we're going to start to see is the stability of wormhole space starting to bring oversupply back in the equation, causing some troubles when it comes to these prices. So we'll probably see some nullsec purchases once in a while that'll drive the price up, but the general vibe I think is going to be down on oversupply when it comes to these ships. Especially the tactical destroyers are definitely flown quite a bit by nullsec players. So let's take a look at the Confessor here, selling for 48 million, buyers are at 44 million. 35, 18, 25, not all that much oversupply, but you can also see that the 5-day moving average is slowly going down from this range as well. Next up we've got the Hecate, actually jumping up a little bit in the last few days towards 60 million. Let's take a look at that. That is selling for 58 million, buyers are at 52 million, Confessor 47, so that's a 10 million difference. You obviously want to be producing Hecates and selling Hecates rather than Confessors at the moment, and that's where you see this result. 34, 87, 65, another 60, another 22, another 25. That is more, generally speaking, than the market can absorb, and so we'll start to go down here again. The question is, will that oversupply, as I expect it will at some point, really start to outpace demand? Then we will start to keep seeing that pressure and those lower prices at some point, again creating a buy opportunity, of course. 52 million for the sellers of Jackdaws, 49 million for the buyers. Not that much oversupply here again, but of course Hecate is again selling for more, so that is sort of normal. One thing to note, of course, the Jackdaw actually went to more than 100 million. Very popular ship in the Imperium. If you spot a buy opportunity in these ships, then definitely load up on some Jackdaws. And then we've got the Zwepel finally, a little bit above 40 million under pressure in the last few days. So you don't, well, you still see 140 of them coming in, but you don't expect that much oversupply in the cheapest tactical destroyer. 44 million for the sellers, 41 million for the buyers, and still supply here. So this is like the one indication that the oversupply might at some point really take over what happens in the Tech 3 market. When it comes to the cruisers, we've got the Legion settling a little bit below 150 million, and that's the bad news. 238 here. That is going to stop the price from really taking back off substantially. If more supply comes in on the Legion, then of course that'll start to compete down again. So another little hint that oversupply might be in the books in the near future. The Loki settling here, well, actually doing pretty well. 195 million for the sellers, 172 for the buyers. I guess that they can't really produce that many all that quickly, so here we don't see the signs of oversupply. It is of course the biggest winner of the CCP changes for the strategic cruisers, and so this one is by far the most expensive. Proteus next, going up in price a little bit. That's quite nice, but after reaching close to a 1-year low, so I think that's pretty normal, breaking through 130, 133 million for the sellers, 122 for the buyers, and here sellers are a little bit more careful. At 138 though, you've got 103.20 available, so decent availability, but at higher prices. And then finally we've got the Tengu that's also going up towards 160 million as its new normal. The one thing to note here again, that 300 of them come in pretty easily as well. 164 million for the sellers of Tengus and 152 million for the buyers of the Tengu. Decently okay margin here, so there are still strong market forces, strong demand here and there, but big supplies starting to come in from time to time as well. It's gonna be pretty interesting. Any major Nullsec war here again could drive everything back up quite substantially. That's when you might want to pick up a couple of these especially tactical destroyers on the dips here. That is something to look into as well, potentially. Next up, we've got the extra materials for this week. I am choosing the pirate battleships. That's been a little bit of a while. They've had this price spike because of a change to their composition by CCP. They were becoming basically a bit too popular in Nullsec, and so I want to see what they have been doing since then. So faction battleship, pirate faction battleships, and that is at 43rd. Right on the money. So here is the Bargus. That was the June spike here, so an increase in price because they were more expensive to produce, and you can see that they used to cost around less than 700 million and now they are settling at 800 million. So that was obviously 846 million for the sellers, 761 for the buyers. For at least the Bargus, we can see this this general trend that I have been seeing quite often is that on a CCP change, the market tends to overreact. And so your best move is actually to try and sell right at this high point, of course, because now the Bargus, sure, you're paying a bit more than before, but not by all that much. Definitely not by what was speculated on early on. Here is the Macarial. Oh, that one actually, all right. So it works like that for the Bargus, but for the Macarial, the market was right on the money. So you can again see the June spike here going from, let's say 350 million, 340, something like that. Yeah, around 340, there you go. And then jumping up to 500 million, and still Macarial, 512 million for the sellers, 480 for the buyers, right on the money. So just as I say that the market tends to overanalyze and over speculate on the changes, here on the Macarial, it's been right on the money. That's quite amazing to me here, that you've got this very stable, basically the continuation of this pattern, but at the higher price range, right where it's expected to be. The Nestor next, that's a completely different story. You also have the June spike, but we're basically back at 400 million where we were before the changes. 404 million for the sellers, 381 for the buyers. So just in the course of 3 battleships, we've got an overreaction by the market, but still a premium to be paid because of the changes. We've got market right on the money, and 200 million, like let's say 150 million increase in price on the Macarial. And then here we've got the Nestor, we've got the over speculation, but then we actually have the market somehow being able to supply more Nestors. That is right back towards basically a negligible impact of the change on the Nestor battleship. Very, very interesting to see that, in my opinion. Next up, let's take a look at the Nightmare. Again, we've got the June spike, a little bit of an overreaction, but you're still paying a decent premium from 300 million to 444 million for the Nightmare at the moment. Pretty small margin here as well. Rattlesnake Victory Edition, that's something completely different, so we shouldn't be checking that, but 3.6 billion if you're interested in one of those. Balgorn next. That one, again, massive spike from let's see what this is at, 220 million up to 370 million, almost a doubling in price, but then a recovery right back down to less than 250. 258 million for the sellers, 243 for the buyers. Very small impact of the change net after these months. Rattlesnake next. That one is a a little bit between most of them, and then the Macarial. So you obviously have the spike up to 550 million almost, but then we're actually settling at 450 for the Rattlesnake. Still quite a bit more expensive than the 350 it was before. 464 million for the sellers, 435 million for the buyers. And finally we have the Vindicator, that yeah, decently well timed by the market, or set by the market early on here. Jumps up to 550 million from 350 million, currently selling for 472 and the buyers are at 442. So that was quite interesting, and I think that this can give you a good indication that CCP impact is huge, right? You can see the big spike on all of these because of a CCP change, but it's not always uniform. I would say that in general though, the market overestimates things and goes a little bit crazy with speculation, so you do have the sell opportunity that is well above what you will ever be able to sell after that, unless CCP comes in again. But sometimes as well the market goes right where it's supposed to be right off the bat as well, and sometimes a CCP change actually ends up being a complete dud here for the Nestor. All of this speculation on the higher prices on the Nestor is basically any trade that happened here, any selling of the Nestor, no, any buying that happened here on the Nestor is actually someone on the losing side of things, because they're buying those at a premium that was completely unneeded just a little bit later. So it's quite interesting, completely a very mixed picture, but definitely showing the strength of CCP intervening in the market, what all of that can mean there. And we still have some time, yep, just to I'll maybe try and add this every week, I'm not sure. Here are some of the purchases that I've personally done pretty recently, where I'm waiting for a bounce back. So construction blocks, as I've said, I purchased a couple of those, managed to purchase a couple of those at like 10,800 I think, but really not as many as I would have liked to buy. So waiting for the jump back up, of course. Liquid ozone next, I bought on this dip. You can see that we've settled back at 100 ISK, so I could, I think, make a bottom for like 990, something like that, very close to that. But personally, I'm going to wait for a better sell opportunity, hopefully in the near future. And I also have an investment in a water-cooled CPU that's a little bit older, so we've definitely bought that well below 10,000 ISK. And now we're waiting for another spike up here on these as well. As I make other investments, I'll keep adding these. As I sell them, I'll get back out. But so right now in these three goods, I am waiting for that sell opportunity, because I picked up at least some of them at what I would consider to be a good price, which is generally going to be these lower bottom prices. That's how I tend to try my trades. Maybe we'll keep you guys posted as well at the end of ETH Talk when something new happens when it comes to these. Anyways, that's going to be it for this ETH Talk then, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Go and enjoy ETH Vegas, and I'll see you all next time.